In the Pokémon TCG, counters come and go. For every powerful card, a counter rises, but some cards manage to stand the test of time, overcoming the very strategies designed to beat them, and no card embodies this resilience quite like Mew Vmax. From the moment of its release in late 2021, competitive players could see the potential in just how strong Mew Vmax would be. Backed by Genesect V with its incredibly strong ability Fusion Strike systems, it could draw cards, power up quickly, and strike hard. It was no surprise that it began winning tournaments left and right. But as Mew Vmax status grew, so did the pressure to take it down. Decks began evolving around one goal: stopping Mew Vmax. Cards like Drapion and Galarian Moltres V, designed to exploit Mew's weakness, the Dark type, rose to prominence. Cards like Spiritomb and Path to the Peak, sought to cripple Genesect's ability Fusion Strike systems, became a go-to counter against Mew. Despite these direct counters, Mew Vmax never truly faltered. It kept winning, kept adapting. Mew would evolve to deal with each threat, innovating and adjusting with each new tech and approach. Aided by its uncanny speed, consistency, and access to the Fusion Strike energy, it certainly had a target on its back. But this target was not easy to hit. Counters are nothing new in the history of the game. Cards have always been printed to check powerful archetypes. Fighting Pokemon too strong? Easy. Print some strong Psychic cards. But Mew Vmax stands alone as a card that no matter how many counters were introduced, it always seemed one step ahead. As we dive deeper into its story, we'll explore how it stood tall amidst the sea of would-be counters from its rise to dominance to its eventual rotation in 2024. This is the history of Mew Vmax. To explain how Mew Vmax functioned and rose to prominence, it's crucial to understand the deck's speed, consistency, and adaptability. Mew Vmax, alongside Genesect V, was able to overwhelm opponents with rapid card draw and efficient attacks, creating a formidable archetype that stayed competitive throughout many formats. The Fusion Strike engine, led by Genesect V's ability to draw cards up to the number of Fusion Strike Pokemon you had in play, allowed Mew Vmax to maintain constant hand advantage and reach its power spike quickly. Its signature move, Cross Fusion Strike, let Mew Vmax copy any attack from your other Fusion Strike Pokemon on your bench, which often included devastating options like Techno Blast from Genesect V to deal 210 damage, or Psychic Leap from Mew V to shuffle it back into the deck. This incredible flexibility allowed Mew to adapt to various situations, whether it was eliminating threats or applying pressure early on. Mew Vmax was designed to overwhelm. The deck could rapidly thin itself, cycle through resources, and pressure the opponents early on, often ending games by turn 3 or 4. With Power Tablet, Mew Vmax could increase the damage output by 30 for each Power Tablet played, overcoming even the bulkiest of Pokemon. Its ability to dig through the deck while dealing high amounts of damage made it extremely hard for most decks to keep up. Mew Vmax faced numerous counter cards designed specifically to deal with it. Cards like Drapion V, which had a direct type advantage, could usually KO Mew Vmax for 1 or no energy at all, because of its wild style ability. Cards like this were introduced to keep the deck in check. However, even with these counters, Mew Vmax found a way to remain a viable option. Cards like Path to the Peak, which were once used to counter Mew Vmax, were now played in Mew Vmax to stop other players from having access to their abilities, including Drapion V and Lugia V-Star, which were both cards that Mew struggled dealing with. What kept Mew Vmax competitive even in the face of these counters was the deck's adaptability. The deck's ability to change its playstyle depending on the meta, from the more aggressive Fusion Energy build to the more consistent and resource-heavy DTE build. The fact that Mew just had so much going for it was really crazy. No retreat costs allowed the card to maneuver in and out of the active spot quite easily, an attack that ignored effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, which allowed Mew to maneuver through cards that blocked attacks from Vs like Miltank, and the low attack cost of a single DTE, allowing the deck to power up incredibly quickly. These, paired with the ability to draw upwards of 15 to 20 cards per turn, allowed Mew to rarely ever miss a beat. Mew also had its fair share of techs that allowed for even more impressive gameplay, such as the aforementioned Path to the Peak. This was another key tool that made Mew so oppressive. Players would drop the path at the end of their turn, disabling opponents' abilities, and then remove it with Lost Vacuum at the start of their next turn, allowing Mew's abilities to remain active. Cards like Echoing Horn also allowed Mew to play incredibly aggressively into decks that would try and get their 2 prize liabilities off the field, as Echoing Horn allowed you to place Pokemon in your opponent's discard pile onto their bench. Cards like Luminion, Crobat V, and even Drapion would be put back onto their bench before being knocked out again. This kind of prize manipulation was incredibly strong. And if drawing an absurd amount of cards to dig for what you wanted wasn't your forte, you could use cards like Charismatic, which would allow you to discard an item card from your hand and flip a coin. If you flipped heads, you could set your deck for any card you wanted to put into your hand, and if you flipped tails, you're now able to draw 2 extra cards with Fusion Strike systems. Talking about this deck now really just makes me see how unfair it actually was. A core reason Mew Vmax succeeded so consistently was, well, its consistency. Genesect V's Fusion Strike system, which kept the deck moving fast and fluid, made sure Mew had all the resources it needed to stay ahead. Decks that feature this kind of inherent draw engine, where attackers double as engines, have a history of dominating formats in the TCG. Take, for example, Zoroark GX, which thrived in a similar fashion. Zoroark's trade ability allowed players to discard a card from their hand to draw 2 more, ensuring a steady flow of resources. This consistent draw engine, like Mew Vmax's Fusion Strike system, gave Zoroark GX decks a massive edge, allowing them to cycle through the deck rapidly, dig for the right cards, and respond to nearly any situation. Both Mew Vmax and Zoroark GX are able to create decks with incredible consistency. When your main attacker also provides the cards you need to keep playing optimally, it reduces reliance on traditional draw support like Professor Research, allowing you to use even more aggressive supporters like Boss Orders or disruptive ones like Judge. This meant that even when facing hand disruption, these decks could bounce back and just keep pressuring opponents. Decks with built-in draw engines are far more streamlined, which in turn leads to more consistent early game pressure. This is also why Mew Vmax remained a top contender even when directly countered. Its ability to just outpace other decks and draw into the right pieces or reset its game plan on the fly made it incredibly resilient. As Mew Vmax cemented itself as a meta-dominating force, two distinct archetypes formed, each with its own strengths, weaknesses, and playstyles. These builds allowed Mew to remain a versatile contender, adapting to different formats and opponents. Let's dive into the two primary variants, the DTE build and the Fusion Strike build. The DTE build is all about setting up Mew Vmax quickly, attaching energies efficiently, and applying early pressure. The loss of 20 damage from the DTE is negligible, as Power Tablet can offset this reduction, allowing Mew to still hit these key knockouts. This list also tends to run Judge or Roxanne to disrupt opponents' hands, capitalizing on the speed and consistency to overwhelm slower setups. The strength of this build was that it was extremely fast, often setting up by turn 2, and not having to force a turn 1 attack going second allowed you to have a slower, earlier game while saving resources for the mid to late game. It was very strong against ability-dependent decks thanks to the Path and Peak and Judge. There were weaknesses, however, and these included a slightly less damage output compared to the Fusion Strike energy builds thanks to the DTE. They were very heavily reliant on finding the DTE quickly or else it just couldn't attack. And the only attacker was Mew Vmax, which meant you're susceptible to your opponent going 3-3 in the prize trade. This list also did not allow the first turn attack option going second. On the other hand, the Fusion Strike build of Mew Vmax focuses on maximizing synergy with Fusion Strike energy and Meloetta. This version had a more explosive potential. The key features of this deck was the Fusion Strike energy, providing multi-purpose energy and unlocking full access to attacks like Technoblast from Genesect V or Melodious Echo from Meloetta. It also prevents abilities like Spiritomb's ability lock on your Genesects, Zigzagoon's Headbutt Tantrum, or Teleon's Quick Shooting from placing damage counters on Mew Vmax. Elis's Sparkle allows you to search out and attach up to 2 Fusion Strike energy from your deck to your Pokémon, accelerating energy across your board. This, paired with manual attached to Meloetta for your first turn, allowed you to hit up to 210 damage or more with Power Tablets. This was super strong as it could prevent your opponent from even setting up. This was really strong against decks like Arceus and Lugia, which didn't do too much on the first turn, and if they weren't able to set up more than one Pokémon, well, you could just win the game that turn. Another card that was quite strong in both decks was Oricorio. It provided added defense with its Lesson in Zeal ability, reducing damage dealt to your Fusion Strike Pokémon by 20, giving Mew Vmax more durability and essentially 330 HP. The playstyle of this build focused more on Elis's Sparkle to spread energy efficiently and apply pressure throughout versatile attacking options. And thanks to the Fusion Strike energy, Mew Vmax can tap into a wider range of attacks, making it more adaptable in-game. The strength of this list was it was just a lot more aggressive than the DTE build thanks to Fusion Strike energy. Strong synergy with Meloetta leading to high damage output even on turn 1, or allowing even 280 damage with all 4 Fusion Strike energy attached to your Pokémon. And if we want to get funny, with all 4 Power Tablets you can be hitting up to 400 damage. Thanks to the Fusion Strike energy, you could just run more attackers, like the Meloetta or even Ice Cube, which allowed you to do 40 damage for each Fusion Strike energy attached to it to your opponent's Pokémon, and that wasn't just limited to their active. Another Pokémon you could use was Excelgor. Although this Pokémon wasn't used very often, when Charizard EX came out, it was actually used a lot more, due to its grass typing hitting Zard for weakness. It would do 120 damage for a single energy if you switched it in that turn, and paired with 2 Power Tablets, you could be taking knockouts on even Charizard EXs. However, this deck didn't come with its drawbacks. Due to more cards being played, it just required a more complex setup, relying on multiple cards like Meloetta, the Fusion Strike energy, and Elis's Sparkle for optimal performance. For instance, on your first turn, you'd have to attach from your hand to the Meloetta and then use Elis's Sparkle to attach 2 more. So if you just drew into 2 energy and even prized 1, you just weren't able to attack that turn, and if you were, you just weren't doing much damage. This made starts of this deck sometimes awkward, because if you saw your opening hand and it just had 2 Fusion Strike energy, there was a good chance you just weren't attacking that turn. A combo relying on this many cards would mean you'd have to dig through your deck quite hard. So sometimes you would have to be discarding these Power Tablets and all these other useful resources that would help in the mid-game just so you can attack on your first turn. This would spread your resources quite thin, and it honestly made the deck a little bit more difficult to play than the DTE build, because you'd really have to focus on when and what resources you want to keep and which ones you want to discard. Even with their variations, both variants did succeed. Both versions of Mew Vmax were incredibly consistent, which was a huge factor in their success. The DTE build provided more disruption, straightforward and consistent gameplay. The Fusion Strike build, on the other hand, offered more explosive power, combo potential, and a wider range of attack options, making a versatile pick against a broader meta. Despite their introduction of various counters like Path of the Peak and Drapion V and Spiritomb, Mew Vmax's ability to adapt and evolve along with these 2 distinct builds allowed it to persist and dominate across multiple formats, whether by focusing on raw speed or unleashing complex strategies. Mew Vmax proved that even with dedicated counters, a well-built deck could still rise to the top. Mew Vmax entered the competitive scene with a storm, and its journey from a newcomer to a dominant force is one of resilience, adaptability, and sheer power. Let's trace the timeline of its competitive history, from its first steps to its current achievement. As more players became familiar with Mew Vmax, its performance skyrocketed. The deck began sweeping regional championships in 2022. It consistently made top 8 appearances at events across Europe and North America. Mew Vmax was widely considered a safe deck choice, fast, aggressive, and consistent. players could outpace their opponents and often set up lethal combos by the second or third turn. A significant victory came in the Salt Lake City Regionals, where Mew Vmax took home the title. This was a key turning point. Not only had Mew won, but it also dominated the top tables. With multiple copies of the deck placing high in the standings, players now knew this wasn't just a strong option, it was the deck to beat. Mew's flexibility made it a lasting threat in the competitive scene, this being one of the main reasons that in the Lost Origins set, Drapion V was printed. This card was designed specifically to counter Mew Vmax by offering a massive one-shot knockout with no energy cost. It kinda just felt a little bit unfair for Mew Vmax, but looking at the deck, it kinda deserved it. Even after all these counters were printed, the deck was not done yet. At the World Championships in Yokohama 2023, despite the odds and the abundance of decks tech to counter Mew Vmax, the deck managed to secure its spot at the top tables. In the end, Mew Vmax proved that even when faced with direct counters, its versatility and sheer power allowed it to persevere. The final matches were intense. Two Mew Vmax players found themselves in top 4, Azul and Vance Kelly. In the end, it was Vance who came out on top, and it would be his Mew Vmax to verse Tord Reklev's God of War EX in the finals. Tord Reklev, strongly considered the final boss of the Pokémon trading card game, and his God of War was no joke. He's been playing this deck since it was released, managing to find a second place finish at the EUIC Championships that year. And as the final started, Vance Kelly was able to pick up the first game. With a little bit of plot armor, Tord was able to equalize at 1-1, and then the magic happened. Mew Vmax is your 2023 Pokémon World Champion.